So, continuing on with our discussion on simple sentence modifiers, so we got to be careful because now that we look at words that start a sentence and we put a comma with them, we start thinking, wait a minute, are these all simple sentence modifiers? Just because of the punctuation. And so that could be deceptive. So, think about it logically. If I said hot and tired, we loaded the camping gear into the Jeep for a long trip home. Or if I said limping noticeably, the runner rounded third base and managed to beat the throw at home plate. Well, both of these start off with some modifiers that took a comma. And you're like, oh, should I look at these as simple sentence modifiers? No. If you think about it, these are basically describing the subject. It's in the first one, it's we who are hot and tired. In the second one, it's the runner who's limping noticeably. These are basically just simply adjectival modifiers. Can you imagine if they were actually modifying the whole sentence? That would mean the whole sentence is hot and tired. It makes no sense at all. Or the whole sentence was limping noticeably. It's not modifying the whole sentence. The reason these took commas is because we have these adjectives at the very beginning of the sentence, particularly a participle with the word tired and the word limping, and those take commas. But just because something begins a sentence and has a comma with it, I don't want you to automatically think, oh, it's a simple sentence modifier. Or if you're diagramming, to think, okay, there's a comma there, so I'm definitely going to float it. We got to think logically, and right now we're only focusing on adverbs, which are modifying the whole sentence. Now, adverbs are a little more challenging because adjectives are a little easier. Usually, adjectives are like very clearly describing the noun, and therefore it makes no sense to float those words like limping noticeably. But adverbs or adverbial modifiers, they're a little more challenging because sometimes when you look at them, you're like, is that modifying the verb or is that modifying the whole sentence? Look at these two examples. On a day like today, I prefer to stay in bed. Or almost every Monday, I make a vow to exercise after school. Well, here are these opening adverbs. One's in a series of prep phrases, and the second one's a bunch of adverbs. Is an adverbial objective. It's a noun, Monday, serving as an adverb. And we put commas with them for a number of reasons. One is because it begins the sentence of a series of prep phrases. The other one is a very long series to get to that adverbial objective. But could you make a case to say, really, they're modifying the whole sentence? Maybe. Is it that you prefer on a day like today? Or that on a I prefer to stay in bed on a day like today. It's hard to tell whether you're describing the verb or the whole sentence. Or do you make almost every Monday? Or do you make a vow to exercise after school almost every Monday? So these are a little more difficult to figure out whether I'm modifying the whole sentence or not. So I try to stay away from those and not overthink them. But it certainly has some discussion behind them, or some I guess some debate on whether it's modifying the whole sentence or it's modifying the verb. Nothing really for us to worry too much about. What I do want to worry about, though, as I go to the back page of my worksheet, is an idiomatic expression. It's almost like I've gone full circle. One of the early things we learned in class was simply about idioms and how we actually use idioms to represent something collectively instead of looking at it as literally what it is. And oftentimes, idiomatic expressions are simple sentence modifiers. And that's oftentimes if we use an idiomatic expression or a figure of speech, sometimes you'll find it has a comma with it for that very reason. So if I said, speaking of the weather, let's decide what we're doing this weekend. Well, speaking of the weather is sort of being idiomatic. You may not necessarily be literally speaking of the weather, but it's sort of like, oh, that's because that's the topic. Oh, yeah, speaking of that. And then you go on from there. It's sort of being an idiom. Or if someone says, well, having said that, the popularity of NASCAR is on the rise due to impressionable school children and influential English teachers. Well, once again, having said that is kind of like an idiomatic expression. It's kind of like a figure of speech. It's sort of an interesting transition that we use to get into the rest of the sentence. As we kind of bridge one thought into the other thought, these are sort of expressions that we use to bridge those thoughts. And they sort of are kind of modifying the whole sentence. It's not literally referring to anybody, particularly in the sentence, but it's sort of just kind of floating there. And so, really, they're modifying that entire sentence. All right. So, because we're not supposed to take them literally, they're idiomatic. And that's the reason why we would call them sentence modifiers. Let's diagram this and see if we can make some sense of it. All right. Let's see if I can get our guy out of here. And let's change my screen a little bit. He's back again. Let me change my screen. For those of you watching, let's do that sentence. Having said that, let's ignore that and let's just do what we have on the other side. We have a subject, which is popularity of NASCAR is, and then talk about another idiom. It is on the rise. It's like saying popularity is increasing. Popularity is, I don't know, something. I'm missing a good one, but on the rise seems to be sort of an idiom for increasing, or in a sense, being like more popular. It's kind of stupid that popularity is popular, but it's kind of what we're saying. So, all right, I feel like I'm drifting here. Here we go. So, our subject is popularity. I know you're thinking, just drink more coffee, old man. All right, so we'd say it's the popularity. Here's the word the, and it's popularity of NASCAR. People are always surprised that I watch NASCAR. It really is quite gripping. I'll just be honest with you. Here is popularity is, and then we have on the rise. And something we did early on in our time together is we took these prep phrases and we put them on a tree if it's being idiomatic. And I think it is. I don't think it literally is in a location on the rise, but I think we're saying it is increasing. So we'd say it is on the rise. And then it's on the rise. Why? Due to, which is a really interesting preposition. So here's due to. Due to, you say it long enough, it just sounds silly. Due to two things. Let's split that. I built mine off the base here. You could have built off of the word rise. I like building off the base. I think it's just a safe place to go. So here's my little split. I do not know if I'm going to have enough room, but we'll go with it. I feel like I have all this white space and I didn't use it. Here's school children, which I made all into one word, which I'm not sure it is or not, but there we go. And they're impressionable school children. Poor little kids. I wrote impressible. Oh my God, they're impressible. I don't even know what that even means. They're impressible. They're unable to be pressed. All right, that's not what we're saying here. All right, so they're impressionable. No, it does say impressible. That's why I wrote it. I think I mean impressionable, but I wrote impressible. Well, because it says impressible, I'm going to write the word impressible, but I think I mean impressionable. Like you can make an impression on someone. I'm even looking at it, wondering if I'm even spelling that correctly. Anyway, and then let's put the word and here. Like the worst video I've ever made in my life. And then we have teachers. And we'd say influential teachers. At least I spelled that correctly. They're not even teachers that can spell, English teachers who can spell correctly. Here's influential teachers and here's English teachers. I'm going to flatten English because that's a noun. And if you don't believe me, I'll fight you. All right, now, I mean, that's not even the whole point. The whole point of this whole sentence is the phrase, having said that. Having said that, let's highlight it, everybody. Here it is. This is our simple sentence modifier. And now instead of a single word, now I'm using this phrase. And so you can do that. There are sometimes you have like a figure of speech or an idiomatic expression, which could be used as a simple sentence modifier. It's not describing any particular word in this at all. And therefore, it's going to float. So I'm going to change my color and I'm going to use my green again. And so instead of floating it as one single line up here, I'm going to draw it like it really is. And if you think about it, it is a participle. It is a participle that has a helper into its word said. So here it is. So I'm going to start with a capital H, having said, and then it has a direct object, which is that. Sitting right here. And that's our simple sentence modifier, this time in the form of an idiomatic expression. What I love about this particular example, as you can see on your worksheet, I ask you a very particular question. How does this break the rules of what we learned in chapter 5, what we just covered? Or what we learned in unit 5, which we just covered? Think about it. We focus so much on participles and making sure the participle agrees with the noun, that it's not dangling. And this is a dangling participle. So if you want to make a note of that, please do, because I might ask you that at some point. I might say, hey, how in the world did we learn in chapter 5 what is now broken in chapter 6 or unit 6? Well, you would say, well, in last unit, this would be called a dangling, if I spell things right today, this would be called a dangling participle. Because who has said that? And that's the whole reason why we call it a dangling participle. Right here, visually, you can see it because The person who has said that is not in the sentence at all. Popularity didn't say that. The way it's written, it sounds like popularity has said that. It didn't. And so that's really a dangling participle. That was before, pre-Unit 6. But now, after what we're learning right now in Unit 6, we would say, oh, don't worry about it. It's not a dangling participle. No, it is a sentence modifier. And that's the reason why it gets to be here, because it's a sentence modifier. It is not a dangling participle. Crazy. I know, right? All right, I'll pause my video, restart, and take a look at the next concept for you.